take care of your health now. Make sure you're weightlifting, make sure you're getting enough protein, make sure you're taking care of your liver and your gut, and you're looking at your hormone levels. You're getting your hormones tested. Hey there, welcome to the Female Health Solution podcast, where we discuss women's health, hormones, and everything else in between. Join me as we dive into the tools that you need to live your healthiest life. Welcome back to the Female Health Solution podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Beth Westy, and we're going to be talking about my PCOS journey today. So this is what got me started in the work that I do now, because of the extreme frustration that I had with my own health issues. Now, I've talked about this before, I've shared with this before, but I think it's really interesting to do updates and also just talk openly and transparently about my own health and the journey that I've been on so that other people can relate to it. Oftentimes, we have such a Western medicine mindset model that we've been following and think that, oh, I take this thing and I get better. I do this thing and I get better, right? But we're not realizing the full scope of how our body functions and what we really need to target so our body can be functionally healthy on its own, where we're not dependent on other things. So for me, things started, after I had my third child. Now, quick backstory on some of this is that I got pregnant first at 24, had my first when I was 25, developed thyroid issues after he was born. Then a year later, got pregnant with my second. She was born via emergency C-section due to a placental abruption. And then again, had thyroid issues after her. And then my youngest, she was born emergency C-section almost 2 months early. And again, another placental abruption. And then again, I had thyroid issues after that. But the one thing that was different with her birth, even though again, it was another traumatic birth, it was early. I was not ready. In fact, my husband and children had just returned 3 days earlier from a trip to Costa Rica. My husband's brother had gotten married and their wedding was in Costa Rica. And I remember asking my OB, this is just an additional note to the story that I don't know that I've shared before. I remember asking my OB at one of my appointments, maybe I was halfway through my pregnancy and we got passports for the kids and I'd gotten a passport. My husband had gotten a passport. And this was before I even knew I was pregnant, because we were planning on going, because they had obviously planned their wedding out of the country from where we live that far in advance so family could come. And then I ended up getting pregnant and I was like, I mean, I'll be 7 months pregnant, but I can go, right? And my OB looked at me sternly and said, listen, you had an emergency C-section last time. Do you want to have that emergency C-section potentially happen in another country? And I said, no, I don't. Because she said, if there's a complication, you would be stuck there. And you know what? She was right. And I have talked about this recently, that birth and some of the emergency signs there. I shared more about that story as well. So you can go back and listen to that episode. But one of the most interesting things, again, looking back at all this information, how do things ended up the way that they did for me? Because I was always a healthy person. I always took a lot of time and energy and effort dedicated to my health. I researched it. I was in grad school, right? I have a doctorate, for Christ's sake, What? And it's one of the most frustrating things to feel like I spend so much time, energy, effort, money on this, on my health. And then I have random wacky stuff pop up like, come on. So anyway, my husband and children went on the trip without me because it was not a safe option. They came home and 2 days later, I went into labor with her early. So absolutely the right move, because who knows if the events or the stress or the travel would have triggered me to go into labor early. right? Absolutely could have, because I was under a lot of stress at that point. Had her, she spent 23 days in the NICU, which I mentioned specifically because it is very stressful. And then I am one who, I always got my cycle back relatively quickly after giving birth within the first couple of months. And she was no exception. This birth was no exception. So I got my cycle back, but I started having excruciating pain. I remember the first cyst that I had, and I didn't know that it was a cyst. I had a searing, stabbing pain when I was standing in the bathroom, and it just dropped me on the floor. I literally couldn't stand. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't speak. It was a hot poker just stabbing me in my abdomen. And I originally thought, oh my gosh, something's wrong with my uterus or the C-section I had. Something is emergency is bad, right? But then after about 10 minutes, it slowly started to fade. And within an hour, like I felt sore, but it wasn't that same pain anymore. And I was like, God, that's weird. Okay. That's weird. What do? Totally ignore it and keep moving on with my day. Not healthy. Not a good idea. I do the same thing again and again. After this keeps happening, I go in for other follow-up appointments. I mentioned this. They look, at one point they see a cyst there. At another point, when I try and make an appointment to go in when I have this pain, they see the remnant of a burst cyst, right? You see the free fluid floating in my abdomen, just lots of fluid there, lots of inflammation. When the cyst does burst, there's so much pain. And then there's that soreness and everything else. It's hard to be active. It was hard to pick up my kids. It was hard to lift a laundry basket. It was hard to do my job. It was hard to eat a big meal. It was painful to have a super full bladder. The internal pressure as well. There was a lot of things that it really interfered with. And of course, I was taking supplements, consulting with all my friends, colleagues, everybody and anybody. I was doing all these things. And it really wasn't until, again, this is a year and a half later then, my husband finally dragged me to the ER because it kept happening. You're thinking a year and a half. And yes, I mean, I wasn't not doing anything in that year and a half. Right. And I know, if you're someone who has struggled with this, I know, right? I was going in, I was consulting with my OB and again, I had just gone through having 3 children in the last several years. So of course I knew this whole team of doctors and everything. And the main person I saw was a nurse practitioner. She was amazing. But they gave me all the same advice, which was very one-dimensional. Very one-dimensional. And all of the other things that I was trying to talk about, they were like, okay, yeah, so I'm taking all these supplements. And I was like, I'm gluten-free and I gave up dairy and I gave up sugar and I'm not drinking anymore and and I'm trying all these things and I'm taking all these supplements. What am I missing? Why is my body doing this? And they're like, well, your hormones aren't balanced. Go on birth control. Here's a bunch of Vicodin. And again, as we have learned, and again, there's a lot more information about this now, about specifically birth control, and then it doesn't regulate your hormones. It interrupts the signal from your brain to your reproductive organs. That's not that's not getting your organs to function better, right? So for me, that wasn't an option. And then of course, the other thing one of the male doctors said that is so incredibly, I'm going to say misogynistic. He was like, well, if you just get pregnant again, you won't have cysts. Okay. Since my last 2 pregnancies almost killed me and the babies, why don't we just roll that dice again, buddy? Jeez. Like, no compassion. Terrible. It was very frustrating and it's very unsettling. But again, I have to thank that doctor because he was the one that sent me into somewhat of a blind rage. And I was up researching in the middle of the night and then started doing things to work with my hormones, work with my body, all of that other stuff. That was the very beginning of it, right? Eating for my cycle, working on an estrogen detox, getting that excess estrogen, excess cortisol out of my system, and then utilizing eat for my cycle hormone patterns, and then doing seed cycling, all that stuff. I was able to get rid of the cysts, and I haven't had a cyst like that since. Overall, again, and I can say this, so my youngest is now 14, so we're looking at like 12 years now. of having totally regular cycles. I am approaching my mid-40s now and can honestly say that I have had regular cycles that are overall not an issue, right? I will have some of them have a little bit of breast tenderness or a little bit of cramping or bloating, or my digestive system will slow down or something. There are signs and signals for me, but nothing like that, none of that pain. I will have more autoimmune issues that can flare up more of my cycle symptoms, but I still haven't had a cyst, and I haven't had a cyst that bursts, right? And there is a difference between a cramp and a cyst. Very big difference. And even women who have a lot of pain around their period, they can get severe pain from cramping. It's still different than that searing pain from a cyst bursting. And then the sickness and the illness that you feel afterwards when you have all that fluid in your system that you have to dissipate. So it's one of the things that I've done, again, even with all the other things that I've been through health-wise, going through mold toxicity, going through a brown recluse spider bite, and then having autoimmune flare-ups and everything since then, having some of the most stressful times in my life, right? There's these things that your body has to endure. Your body has to just work through. And I share this not to say, oh my gosh, poor me, I've had all these things kind of occur. No, it's nobody's health journey is perfect. So if I think about the last 12 years of my hormonal health journey and the improvement that I made, and then 8 years ago is when my husband was arrested for domestic violence, and then working through all of that, getting my strength back, everything else. And then it was 3 and 4 years ago, I started working through the mold toxicity. And then it was almost 2 years ago, not quite 2 years. I think 2 years ago-ish, that I had the brown recluse spider bite. Now, fingers crossed, I haven't had anything big pop up since then. Let's keep it that way. But there's several things, major life and health events, I'm going to call them events, not crisis or anything, that potentially would be triggers to bring back those cysts. Why hasn't that happened for me? Because I work with a lot of women that they'll say, oh, I had cysts before, or this and this, or whatever. How do I manage this? How do I navigate this? Right? I just keep supporting my hormones, and I do the best I can to recover whatever health thing is going on. It doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean that it happens overnight for me. I worked on my strength and cortisol health for a year and a half solid, And this was 8 years ago when I was in complete adrenal shutdown, right? I had lost so much muscle mass and I was so weak. I couldn't do a lunge, like a standing lunge, without tipping over because I had no balance. It took me a year and a half to work back from that. That's a really long time. But still at that same time, I did not develop another cyst because I was consistent with supporting my hormones. Not everybody has that story. The other thing to keep in mind with PCOS, when we talk about the different types of PCOS, when we talk about how that can shift and change throughout your life, right? I'm looking at my life and my PCOS journey started about 12 years ago, and then now to where I am now, and I'm starting to potentially enter that perimenopause phase, or I will be in the next, let's say, 5 years. For my family, just a side note, for my family history, I would not expect to really start entering perimenopause until my later 40s and then be in menopause by around age 53, according to family history things. Everybody is different. Family history plays a role in it, your overall health, all that stuff. So that's what I've got locked and loaded up here. But as I'm looking at going into that phase for myself, I'm looking at the next 5 years of my life and wanting to make sure I support my health as best I can, because your PCOS can shift and change in type as you get older, because it is not necessarily just a reproductive issue. It is a metabolic issue, an insulin resistance issue, which means that when other things shift in your life, like your hormones, just naturally throughout life, like they should, going through perimenopause, your progesterone levels change, your estrogen levels change, all that stuff happens. Yes, it's not bad. It's just the way that it is, but it can impact your PCOS and it can present in a different way. And it would take different assistance to help regulate that or get through it. Or it can have really negative side effects, or it can kind of knock you on your butt. This is where I see this from women all the time. They'll say, yeah, I was diagnosed with PCOS, 15 years ago. And they went on birth control, or they did something, or da-da-da-da-da. And now they're going through perimenopause, or they're in menopause. And they're like, they're listing off these symptoms, which are still symptoms of PCOS. But because your hormones are different, they might not be thinking of PCOS, but PCOS is a metabolic issue. Yay! So just because you go through menopause doesn't mean it goes away. So that's the other thing people ask me, like, how do you get rid of, how do you heal or cure your PCOS? And I'm like, yeah, that's not a word you can ever use associated with that, because functionally that's not how the body works. And even though I've been through really stressful things, really toxic things, right? The mold and everything else, spider bite, which was awful. I've talked about that. I am at severe risk then for my cysts just coming back if I am not careful on still supporting my hormones. Because that was there in my history, it has the potential to show up again. So I have to make sure I'm supporting my pathways, my gut health, my cortisol levels, and my hormones. That's how you move through it. So the journey I'm on now, have I had a cyst in the last 11 years, 11 and a half, 12 years? No. Have I had other health stuff? Absolutely. But it hasn't brought back those cysts, but moving forward. And this is, again, as you're listening to this, as you're learning about this, and just like think about your life specifically. That's what I want you to get from this story that I'm sharing about my journey. What is your journey? You are the expert on you. You are the expert on what you've been through. And for you to really understand and work with somebody who will take the time to talk to you about, or even read the information that you send them. I have women send me paragraphs and stories, and they'll be like, sorry, this is so long. And I'm like, good Lord, thank you for sending me your detailed health history, because that's so helpful. When I go in, if I have to see a new provider, I have to tell them, by the way, I have a history of this. And they might not be thinking like, oh, you had PCOS before. And I'm like thinking, yeah, it can still be relevant because it's a metabolic issue now. Right? I want to know this information about you. It's relevant and it's important. These are the things that I've been through. These are the things that are currently bothering me. Here's where I'm at, and here's where I want to go. Like for me personally, all that other stuff that I've been through, here's where I'm at right now. My hormones are still regulated. Cortisol, come on. But for my health goals right now, especially for the next 5 years, I really, really, really want to build muscle. I lost muscle mass going through the mold issues, working through the mold illness. So I really want to rebuild a lot of that muscle and get that back so that when I enter perimenopause and go into menopause in the next 10 years, so in 10 years from now, I want to be set for muscle. And that might sound crazy, but I know that with a history of PCOS, and it's a metabolic issue, I really need to dedicate time, energy, effort to maintaining my muscle tissue now, so that in 10 years, approximately when I go through menopause, I'm not going to have really negative effects from that. I'm not going to get knocked on my butt from the menopause or from any other metabolic issues that can potentially show up and I'm at way higher risk for because of PCOS. It's not fair, but it doesn't matter if it's fair, right? If you know this information, you can think about where you're at right now for your life. And it's not necessarily just easy, but it's simple to apply. Make sure you're weightlifting, make sure you're getting enough protein, make sure you're taking care of your liver and your gut, and you're looking at your hormone levels. You're getting your hormones tested. Again, Dutch test, a dried urine test for comprehensive hormones, not a blood test, but a urine test to let you know what your hormone levels are and how to support them the best moving forward. Take care of your health now. Right now, I don't have any major health issues. Right now, I don't have anything bad going on. Bad, right? But this is the time to really advance my health, to really get it at its peak, so that if something does flare up, if I have an autoimmune flare up, if something happens, and God forbid I get bit by another stupid spider, I still have a decent sized scar from that, by the way, it's not going to knock me down and out, and I'm not going to lose muscle from it though. That's the thing, because it's a huge priority going into the next phase of life. That's what I wanted to share about my PCOS journey. These are the things that I work with women on all the time. PCOS, endometriosis. Endometriosis is a little different because it's not as much of a metabolic as it is autoimmune and an inflammation reaction. So there are some similar things as PCOS, but sometimes a little different angle you got to take with that. But again, moving into different phases of life, your body shifts and changes, and it's not bad. You just have to change what you're doing to match the new body that you're living in. And that's it. And then you can continue to work on your health and feel good about it, because you're going to be seeing results happen for the effort and energy that you're putting in. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Let me know if you have any other questions. If you need more info on Dutch testing, you can find it linked, of course. But that's where I put out a ton of info on Dutch testing, but it is the most helpful information on your hormones moving forward. So I'll see you guys later. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for joining me on today's episode. If you would like more information, just head on over to drbethwesty.com for all the show notes and information from today's episode. And if you're looking for more community, more support, you can find and follow me on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and I would love to see you there.